When I was a resident, Margaret Ann would bring our children down to Charity Hospital, and in the lobby of Charity Hospital there was a very large circular medallion with the state emblem there, and sweet little Ann would dance around the thing like this was her performing area. And Dean would continue to ask, when are we going to eat? So indeed they'd come down on Sundays for lunch. The families were invited to join the young residents in the dining room. And it was wonderful when they came. In fact, that was, I frequently went months without seeing them except on Sunday noon. But we made it, and now we've got 2 fine children and 4 fine grandchildren. We've always been very deeply interested and committed to the work of the church. When Dean was a senior in high school, I decided to do a mission to Haiti. And before we went, though, I took him and gave him some string and taught him to tie knots using a spindle on a bed upstairs, so that I could depend on him to help me with the operations we were going to do. And we had a wonderful trip to Haiti. I think we spent about 10 days at that. It's an Episcopal mission hospital, but it's staffed principally by volunteers from the Presbyterian Church. And indeed, I would operate from dawn till dusk with Dean helping me. And I shudder now to recall that Margaret Ann and Ann would take the stained, the soiled, we call them laparotomy pads, out in the back and wash them off with their bare hands. And then later they would be autoclaved to sterilize them. Not before, but after they had washed them. I'm glad there was no Ebola at that time or any other serious contagious disease, because there would have been no more Lindseys, I guess. Dean, I guess I had secretly hoped that Dean would use this experience to decide yea or nay whether he might study medicine. But indeed he did not. He went to Vanderbilt, where he majored in philosophy and minored in Mandarin Chinese. In fact, he gave it a little thrust at the first, taking some of the pre-med courses, but he called one day and said, "Dad, I don't like all these spots and dots and genuses and species, so I'm gonna move into philosophy." And he did, and he's done well in it, if you can call a preacher a philosopher. But I'm very proud of him. He's well situated now in a church that he accepted last fall in 2013 in State College, Pennsylvania. I had no idea where that was. In fact, it is where Penn State is located. And so many of his church are faculty members at that wonderful university. It's a nice church, actually larger than St. Charles Avenue Presbyterian, and which seats 500 plus, I believe. Ann took her degree in art history at Vanderbilt, only to find that with a degree in art history, if your daddy wasn't a big donor to the various galleries, you had a long wait to get a job. So she came back to New Orleans and ultimately worked with a brokerage firm here, and then came along Jack Wilhelm, who was a young attorney with Amico. And it was interesting because at that time Bill Adams had appeared at Amico locally as the vice president. Bill, you may remember from my earlier comments, was one of my roommates or suite mates in the Navy. So one evening, Ann Jack was at the house to pick up Ann, and about that time, Bill and his lovely wife arrived, and I introduced Jack to Bill Adams, and he didn't know quite what to make of the big boss, because he never would have met him, of course, in the course of his own work there. But it went smoothly, and everybody went their way that night. Bill was a good friend, and we miss him. As it has turned out, Jack has done a lot of work for the sons of Bill, who established a company called Adexo, Adams Exploration Company in North Texas. And he's maintained contact with them, and they have done very well. Being some of the first to take advantage of the shale drilling, the horizontal drilling, which in fact their father was instrumental in developing with Amoco. Ann has always been a wonderful daughter. She has been at our beck and call when we've had problems. But I'm most proud of her work in the community in Austin and in her church, the University Presbyterian Church. And above all, she's been a world-class mother for her son Edward. She's nurtured him through several schools. They moved around. That must have been tough. From New Orleans, they moved first to Chicago, and were there for about 4 years while Jack was at the company headquarters. Then all of a sudden in the 80s came the downside in the petroleum industry, and Jack and 40 other young Amoco lawyers were on the street. Then they ultimately moved to Midland, Texas, and there was another school to go to, and kept Edward in line. Then they moved from Midland to Austin, where Jack was the lobbyist for Exxon in the state of Texas. She's been very active in volunteer organizations that have taken unto themselves clothing some of the homeless children, or at least impoverished children in Austin. She's found a way to buy blue jeans, denims, for those children at about $5 a piece, $5 a pair. And the same stuff seems to sell for $30 or $40 in the market. The other thing she has done and been quite good at, she served as president of the Women's Club of Austin, which is an old club there. And Ann has some of the marvelous qualities of her mother, who served as president of the Orleans Club here. And she was well respected in that position of leadership.